The teachers present, my fellow students, good morning. I'm John Roberts PADDE, and I'm here to present my study titled Tolerance to Heat Waves in Mosquito Larvae is Mediated through Calcium Ion Channel Signaling. My presentation will entail the following, and to begin with is the introduction. In the beginning of the 20th century, scientists predicted that climate change would increase the people at risk of malaria by 60%. Other mosquito-borne infections like yellow fever, dengue, Zika, chikungunya are projected to escalate in transmission in a warmer world too. These hypotheses were grounded on facts that mosquito populations increase in a warm and humid weather. However, these factors are studied in climatic conditions that occur in long periods and at higher frequencies. In the recent decade, we've noticed increase in heat waves. These heat waves are spikes in temperatures above the daily maximum, and each country has got a different definition of what a heat wave is. For instance, in China, a heat wave is characterized as temperatures of 3 degrees above the daily maximum occurring for 3 consecutive days. So how would mosquitoes respond to heat waves, and how would this relate to transmission of mosquito-borne infections? One major aspect is the biological response to external warming, and this can be represented as the thermal performance curve. Of course, rising from the lower performance limit, peaking at the optimum and then falling at the upper maximum. Species with a narrow performance curve are always vulnerable to temperature changes as compared to their colleagues with a broad thermal performance curve. In addition to biological response to external temperature, how mosquitoes would respond to a changing climate would also depend on how they regulate their own body temperature, shifting their life cycle events like shortening the reproductive time or migrating to places with an optimal climatic condition. Mosquitoes always avoid and sense temperature behaviorally through the activation of the thermosensitive receptors. These receptors have the transient receptor potential ankyrin 1 that is expressed in the antennae. Studies have shown that silencing of this gene in adult mosquitoes results in loss of thermal perception and failure to distinguish between the hot and warm stimuli. Therefore, our study is seeking to understand what would happen to mosquitoes when they are exposed to a constant temperature where there's no route of escape, and what molecular pathways are involved, and how these mosquitoes modulate their physiological events. To study that, we hypothesize that the TRPA1, when it is shut down or deactivated by constant heat, the cation channel is closed, and this prevents the entry of external or extracellular calcium ions. Hence, the mosquito will depend on the internally generated calcium ions to counteract and modulate the heat stress, and also to modulate other biological functions like growth and development. To study this, we designed our study in such a way that we got the mosquito colonies from the Nanjing Medical University Laboratory and then gave them a blood meal and allowed them to lay eggs. And then the larvae were hatched and grouped into 2 cohorts. In the first cohort, we maintained these mosquito larvae at optimal conditions for growth, that is 27 degrees. And then in that second group, we raised these mosquitoes at a heat wave, which we defined as 5 degrees above the optimum. That's 33 degrees Celsius for 3 consecutive days. These larvae are later on, after the 3 days, were assessed for survival and allowed to grow into adults. And the mosquitoes that were kept at 27 degrees also were allowed to grow up to adults, and then they were exposed to a heat wave. After that, these mosquitoes, RNA was extracted and then the expression of molecules involved in behavioral avoidance of heat were assessed or analyzed. We also assessed reproductive fitness by looking at the size of the reproductive organs and also assessing the fecundity of mosquitoes. Our results: the first, we observed that the larvae stage is significantly affected by heat waves compared to adults. In here we found that the larvae survival under heat wave was significantly reduced. This one here was significantly reduced as a negative attribute to mosquitoes. But again, positively to mosquitoes, when we look at image B, that the mosquito size or the larvae size after heat wave was significantly increased, and it is development time from larvae to adults was significantly shortened by about 6 days. Therefore, we realize that growth is enhanced during heat waves, whereas the survival is negatively affected by heat stress. Secondly, we observe that heat stress affects reproductive organ development. In here, we isolated the reproductive organs and realized that under the ADL group, the testes were significantly reduced, whereas the male accessory glands in mosquitoes, when adults are exposed to heat wave, were significantly increased. And when we looked at the ovaries in females, we realized the ADL group, the ovaries were significantly reduced. However, following a 24 hours blood meal, the follicle size in the heat-exposed groups were significantly increased. We then assessed the fecundity and realized that heat waves reduced the number of egg grafts laid within a given population. As we can see here, that in the ADL group, that is mosquitoes raised from the larvae, we see that the number of egg grafts in a given mosquito population were significantly reduced relative to both the control and then the AD group. And then we also realized that the number of eggs in the heat-exposed mosquitoes was significantly increased. However, the pupation, hatching rate, and emergence rate had no significant results. And then the size of the F1 generation significantly increased in the heat wave groups. Lastly, we realized that heat wave indeed leads to the shutdown of the TRPA1 gene, and as this happens, the calmodium responsible for signaling of calcium was increased, and the heat shock response proteins, small heat shock protein and then heat shock protein 90 was significantly increased. This study is continuous. We are still continuing on this study, and we want to look at calcium signaling in the head and reproductive organs, the reactive organ species, and then the role of intracellular calcium ions. Thank you.
Thank you, John. It was much better time.
Any questions?
So we don't have a question for John Roberts, so that we can just move on to the next speaker. A little bit behind schedule.
All right. No question?
Okay. I remember there's several different kinds of mosquito species. So do you see any difference between the species of the mosquitoes?
Here we are using a model mosquito, and that's the Culex pipens. But rather in several other studies, they find that actually the expression of the TPRA is different in different species of mosquitoes depending on the climatic conditions they exist. The TRPA1 is more expressed in the mosquitoes in the tropical regions, in the hot regions, compared to the temperate mosquitoes. Thank you.
Thank you.